Well, hey everyone, Brian and Dani Howard here, and we're here to tell you our story. So we met all the way back, it was really 11 years ago this month, in April of 2010. You want to tell how we met?
Yeah. So I had just finished my first year at Pepperdine and was looking to become a summer intern here at Calvary with our student ministries. And so I came in for an interview and I was offered the position and they said, oh, by the way, we're about to hire your co-intern for the summer. He's right outside. They're like, do you know Brian Howard? And I was like, no, who is that? And I'd grown up at Calvary, so I thought I knew everyone. And they're like, yeah, he's new to Calvary. He just graduated from college. So already alarm bells were going off in my head like, oh man, it's an old new guy into our church. What? I already don't like him. He's a newcomer. And also I'm just too shy and I'm nervous around people I don't know. And, but they were like, yeah, he's right outside. Let's introduce you to him. And I remember standing up and just a brief thought crossed my mind. Like, what if this is your husband? And I was like, no, that's silly. And then I turned the corner and I saw him and he was wearing a very light blue shirt, matched his light blue eyes. And I looked at him and I said, nice to meet you. And in my head, I said, he's so old. That was all I could think about was just, he's an old college graduate. He seemed eons beyond my life experience. And so I was like, okay, cool. And then I went on with my life. No, but actually, no. What happened? Oh, yeah. Then it was like a month later, like right before. Was it before we started?
Yeah.
This is the age of Facebook Messenger, guys, okay? He Facebook messaged me and said, hey, I'm getting to know all the interns this summer. Can I take you to lunch? And I remember talking to my mom and being like, Mom, what is this? Is this guy trying to date me before we start? Like working together? This is so strange. And she was like, he's just asking you to lunch. He's probably just trying to get to know you. And I said, this is weird. But so I went and was that the time you paid for me? No, you did. Did you pay for me? Yeah, you paid, and he paid for my lunch. So I was like, is this guy like throwing out feels? And so a little background on me and relationships up until this point. I was a serial, what's a serial?
Dater?
A dater, but like long-term relationship dater. Like I had a relationship all throughout high school and then another long-term relationship into college. And so I had always been in a relationship. I had always been looking for my fairy tale story. I had always longed for that. And so it was after my breakup in my freshman year of college that I really was like, okay, God, I need to not put all my time and energy into relationships with boys. I need to actually focus on my relationship with Jesus. And so in January 2010, I basically said, Jesus, I'm going to date you because that was the only concept that I could understand because I knew how to be in a relationship with boys. I just hadn't transitioned or hadn't figured out a way to do that with Jesus. And so instead of calling my boyfriend on the phone, while in the car driving, I was talking to Jesus in the car and learning to pray continuously throughout my day and talking to him like he was my source of compassion and that he was my source of contentment and relationship. And so anyway, between those talks with Jesus, I'd been like, okay, God, I'm about to leave for Switzerland and study abroad my sophomore year. So I'm going to be gone anyway, away from my norm, away from my college campus, away from my church. So it doesn't make sense for me to start a relationship. So this next year, I'm giving completely and totally to you, Jesus. And then in April, we met And that thought popped in my head. And then you took me to lunch, and I still was like, you were still being pretty, I don't know, like professional is the word, I guess. He was being professional. Like there was nothing, like you weren't flirting with me at that point. That came later. But yeah, so anyway, there were just things that were kind of happening, but I was supposed to not be dating anybody. That was the rule. But that wasn't, I broke the rule. That's the spoiler alert. I broke the rule that year. So yeah, you should talk about your lead into that moment.
Yeah, so for me, I'm a senior in college, and I'm down at Loyola Marymount University and starting to apply to churches and jobs and trying to figure out what comes after college, which is actually the most terrifying part. Everyone thinks college is the scary part. The real scary part is what do you do after college? Because there's no choice. There's a million choices. And so starting to really examine that, got offered an internship or to apply for an internship here at Calvary the spring of my senior year. And that's when I came in for that interview that Dani had referenced. And so we met on April 20th, 2010, as I was going into an interview, and she was coming out of the interview. She remembers kind of having a moment of thinking maybe this is something, but then moving on from that. I have to confess, I did not have any kind of moment. I was career focused. I was dialed in. I was getting a job. I had a mission to accomplish.
Shocking to everyone.
No one's surprised by that. But went in, really, the bottom line for me is got that internship and began serving at Calvary and did kind of in the lead up to that, try to have lunch with a bunch of people, get to know some people. I had graduated about a month before my internship here at Calvary started. So I had about a month living up in this area with no work to do, but with just time on my hands to get lunch with people, get to know people. And so brought you out to lunch just to kind of get to know you. And there was one other intern, Thomas, who was working with us that summer.
Yeah.
I was just trying to get some time with y'all to kind of understand what this church is like. Many of you know kind of what it's like to walk into Calvary and you don't know a lot of people. That was me in 2010. I really didn't know many people. And so getting to know you, it was wonderful. Just like you kind of had a commitment that you weren't going to date. I had my own sort of, I'm not going to date. And it was less a ideological sort of, I shouldn't be dating right now or should focus. It was more of I want to make wise decisions about my future. And I think if I try to date right now, it'll kind of make me make decisions based on impulse and emotion and infatuation rather than on what God's call for me is or what's most sound for my future. And so I had kind of shut off the whole dating thing too. So when we started working together, obviously she's beautiful and wonderful and charming and funny and all of these things. But I think I just really had this wall up of that's not what's happening this summer. In fact, I've said this before, I didn't even want to stay at Calvary. I had no intention of staying at Calvary, no intention of being here. And so there were a lot of thoughts in my mind that did not lead to me and you being together. But then we start working together that summer. And we, throughout the month of June and July, are just doing summer ministry here at Calvary, which is bonfires. It's Sunday services. We're gearing up for summer camp. There's a lot of good things going on. And I think really what starts to happen is we start to serve the Lord together and really enjoy being around one another, not just enjoying the work we're doing, but enjoying who we're doing the work with. And I think that's when it kind of maybe shifted from that professionalism to flirting. And starting to have some feelings and starting to really just enjoy that time together. One of the things we did that summer is you would host parties at your house on Monday night where we would
watch The Bachelorette.
We would watch The Bachelorette, yes. And what would happen is all the girls were there to watch The Bachelorette and all the boys were there to be with the girls. And that was certainly why I was there. Just to be clear, no interest in The Bachelorette, but every interest in being around her. And so I remember those nights just getting to hang out and watch movies or watch TV and eat food with a big party of people. But more and more, I started to become interested in spending time with you. And that's kind of what I remember from the early days.
We used to do this volunteer thing at the Cerebral Palsy Home in Thousand Oaks on Monday nights. And I remember that was always a really fun student ministries event, and we had high school students coming, and it was such a neat way to serve. And afterwards we'd take them to Yo's and Frogurt, which I don't even know if that's still there, and there was like a Taco Bell. And so we used to do this thing, and it's where we would play Jinx, right? And we would like have to, and if we jinxed each other or something, then the other had to buy each other a Coke or a Diet Coke. And so that became like our kind of the beginning of our flirtation was all around Diet Coke, and we are still so addicted. That was the one thing.
That's what you chose to say on the video.
It's real. It would be embarrassing for them to know how many flats of Coke Zero we go through a month. Okay, but we're not. Okay, we won't. But but that was a bonding thing.
It was a bonding thing.
That was what made me think, oh, you're like fun, not just focused.
Yeah. Well, then I remember, I think what kind of broke through whatever walls or barriers I had. I remember there was a time when you didn't show up at work, or you're somewhere not at Calvary, and I learned that you were sick. And I remember this very funny thing that happened when you were feeling sick, and it wasn't like a serious illness. It was just you had a cold or something. Right. But I remember feeling like, oh, I want to take care of her. And that was weird. I didn't want that. I wasn't looking for that. I wasn't after that. But I just noticed that inside of me of like, Dani is sick and I would like to be the one who brings her soup or takes care of her or does something. And I think that was a moment of realizing, oh, there are feelings there. And I remember expressing those feelings even to guys like Drew Walton or JD Lasky, just kind of processing through, hey, I think there's feelings here. And I'm not even entirely sure what to do with those feelings, but that's how I felt.
Oh my gosh, this is so funny. This brings back so many memories because I remember that happened. And then like 3 days later, The Dark Knight, I think it was just The Dark Knight, came out and we all went to a midnight showing. And I remember that we were at the movie theater and he was so sneaky and like cut someone else who was standing behind me so that he could sit next to me during the movie. And I was like, that's really suspicious.
Because if you ever walk into a movie with a group of people, you end up just sitting next to whoever you happen to be behind. And so I thought, okay, I'll just slide in. Exactly. So we happen to be sitting next to each other doing the movie. It was very, very sly.
Yeah. No, it was not. It was very obvious. But I was like, okay. And again, I was just like, okay. But also, I'm not dating and I'm leaving. And I was going to be leaving in a month to fly across oceans to live in Switzerland for an entire school year. So,
because at the time we met, I just graduated college and you were going into your sophomore year at Pepperdine. And so you were going to be local, but except for that year, you were going to be abroad. And so that's what we were kind of looking forward to in the fall. But to rewind to the summer, we start to kind of flirt a little bit. And then there's one infamous night where I asked you out to dinner. And somehow you were under the impression that it was all of the staff or all of the interns going out to Stonefire Grill.
Yes.
And I had just meant to ask you out to dinner, not even necessarily as a date, just like let's spend some time together, let's hang out together after work. And so you showed up expecting a crowd and I showed up expecting you. And so I was thrilled, but you were terrified.
And I was so confused because I was like, what? Why is it just me? And then he paid for my dinner and I was like, what's happening? And then the next day was a bonfire night. I remember talking to one of the middle school interns, Bree, and I remember we were walking. Everyone else was busy working and setting up for the bonfire, and she and I were pretending to look for her contact lens in the parking lot while I was like, what do I do? He paid for my dinner. I think it was serious. I think he's being datey. Was that a date? I don't know. And she was like, it sounds really datey to me. And I was like, but 2 days later, he made it very clear. Well, no, you didn't make it clear. Did you make it clear? The Getty date? Is the Getty date? See, we have so many things.
So there's some debate for us when our first date actually was. Really in July of 2010, starting to really have feelings, recognize that, feeling that reciprocation. And then I asked her to just hang out for the day. And so where this had come from was when I was a senior in college, I went to school down by the Getty down in LA, and I had a class where we had to go to the Getty and look at some artwork and learn some things about it. And so I had kind of just recently been there and thought like that would be a fun date to go down for the day. And so I asked her if I could go to her house and pick her up. I go to her house and I come in and her mother is kind of like all excited about me being there and wants to know all about me. And like the way she's talking about me makes me feel like you're talking about me like I'm a boyfriend and I don't know how this happened. And I've later come to know that's just who my mother-in-law is. And I love her. She is a remarkable woman. But I remember that. I remember we drove out to the Getty and we were driving out there and it was very funny at the Getty because I had just been there like 2 months earlier and hearing about this artwork. So I was trying to impress her with like, well, if you look at this painting here, here's what you'll know.
And I could care less.
I do not know any things about paintings and she doesn't care about paintings. intense. But it was time together.
Perfect comment.
And it was our first real extended time together that wasn't about Calvary.
Yeah.
And was really just the two of us, and it wasn't about work, and it was just about us being together.
Yeah. And he played me country music, which, I mean, if I talk through it, there's really not many things that went right about this date. But we're so different. Like, it is like Jesus that brought us together. I think Jesus and Diet Coke. But no, that date was really fun. Even in your country music taste, which became our song later on. But he wrote, what was the song? Lee Bryce's
Oh,
see, we can't even remember it. So it's not even a good song. Because it's country.
Tell the truth.
Love Like Crazy.
Love Like Crazy.
There we go. Okay. And so again, this all felt very datey. Yeah. There's a funny story, but I don't know that we need to share this.
Share the story.
The Marilyn Monroe story? Okay. So we're at the Getty, and he's trying to impress me with the artwork and stuff, and it's going great. And then we walk out to the that's your phone.
Oops.
You gotta put it on silent mode for the story. So we're at the Getty, and we walk outside, and if you've ever been to the Getty, it's just a panoramic, beautiful view of Los Angeles, and it was a gorgeous day. And so we're standing there side by side, kind of like leaning over the railing, observing the view. But it's also, the Getty's up on a hill, and I was, trying to look cute for this maybe date, maybe not date. And I'd worn like this cute little skirt, and the wind just decided to just pick it on up, and I was trying to Marilyn Monroe it, and he's standing next to me. He's like looking at me like, you okay there? And I was like, I'm fine. I'm just trying to be modest, guys. And then he pulls the move of the century, because then this is when I knew this was a date. And he just this was like the smoothest move you've ever done in your entire life.
To this day.
To this day. You came around me, and you just had your hands on either side of me, and it was very respectful, but you were just trying to keep the wind from blowing up my skirt. And it was so sweet. And you were just standing behind me, and we were looking out, and it felt like Rose and Jack on Titanic. And I was just like, this is the best. This is really sweet. And I think because you did it, and it didn't, and it was just I felt protected, and I felt safe, and I felt cared about. And that just, it was very gentlemanly and very chivalrous, and that was really cool. And then you had a plan, and you're like, hey, how about we go down to dinner, and then we get some Diddy Reese afterwards, and just again, that my first impression of you is that you were old, and I think this was the moment where I was like, oh no, he's mature, he's got his stuff together, he has a plan, he knows what he wants, and he's going for it, and he's taking care of me, and I love this. And so it was this really cool moment where I was like, okay, this is definitely a date, but I'm here for it. But I'm also in the back of my head being like, shoot, but I promised God I'm not supposed to date right now, so this is going to be confusing. And it was. I made things so complicated.
She did. So we do that day, and it's very unclear, was it a date or not, and that's where we kind of go back and forth. But I do remember maybe the next week, I think I found you here at Calvary and asked you to go, and I said, I want to take you on a date, and I was really clear, it's a date, and so that was our first date, and I think that summer we maybe had 3 dates that were really more formal, and this is in late July and August as you're heading off to school, and we're doing summer camps and things like that. And I remember the second date of those 3, I brought you out on a boat on the middle of Westlake Lake, and we went out to a nice dinner, and the sun was setting. And at that point, I asked if you would be my girlfriend. We were going on dates, but I said, let's be boyfriend and girlfriend. And your answer was?
No. Because I'm leaving in 2.5 weeks, and I'm not supposed to be dating anyone officially. I mean, we're going on dates, and that was my exception to the rule. I don't know. I was making it up as I was going, but yeah. So I said no, But I said, no, but we can keep dating. And we did, and he kept hanging out with my family. And then you had the really cool night. Again, I kept like being really rigid to this promise of like me not dating. And I was trying to be really, trying to be wise about it, because I had promised God, like, hey, I'm not supposed to be dating anyone but you. And then this guy comes along, and the more time I'm spending with him, he's just checking off like every single box that I've ever dreamt of. And it was like, okay, God, how do I reconcile this? How do I'm really liking him, and I really like what I'm seeing, and the way that he treats me, and the way that he loves you, the way that he loves ministry, and that we get to serve together. Like, this is all like, this feels like it's adding up, but how do I know if this is right for me or not? And that was a question that even in those few weeks leading up to leaving was just like I was wrestling with constantly. But I think another conversation that you and I had, because we were really getting to know each other. And I remember you being at my sister's birthday party, and we ran into an ex-boyfriend of mine, picking up Subway sandwiches. And it kind of just, the conversation eventually led to like talking about our past relationships. And then it just led into me basically feeling the need to, and maybe it was like subconsciously my way of trying to like shoo him away, to like scare him away, to just be like, hey, here's my past. Here's everything that, all the boundaries I've crossed, and here are the ways that I've messed up in relationships, and I'm really probably just not worthy of you and of this exemplary guy that you are. And, I'm really not. And so here you go. And I'm crying, and I'm basically just confessed everything to him and saying, I'm so sorry. I totally understand if you're, if you want to not pursue this anymore. Trust me, I get it. And instead he looked at me and he just said, Dani, I see you the way that God sees you, chosen, holy, and dearly loved. And I remember in that moment just being blown away that a man could look at me and say words that were so true because they're scripture and they're God-breathed, and he's saying them to me because he believes it wholeheartedly, and that's the way he would love me, is because he loves Jesus so much. And that's his relationship with Jesus is just pouring over into his care and love for me. And I think that was a moment that I was just like, is this guy for real? Because I've never met a man up into this point in my life who would respond that way and not respond with defensiveness or disgust or anger or defensiveness. Like, it was just pure compassion and pure it was like just beautiful. And so, yeah, that was a moment. I wish I could say it. It was like right after that, I was like, great, we'll be boyfriend and girlfriend now. It wasn't.
It was not.
It wasn't even after that.
But you know what? I do think that summer was really this kind of bumpy time of us trying to figure out if we were boyfriend, girlfriend, liked each other, didn't like each other, wanted in or out. And I think your own journey was wrestling with the Lord and those things. And my own journey was wrestling with my own flesh and me wanting to have a career and go places and do things. But then I think if I'm looking back on that time, I realized like there was something that presented itself, and you were the something, someone who presented themselves that said, no, this is actually worthy of everything else. Like you can put everything else on hold, but here's a person in front of you. And if I were to kind of sketch out the person that I wanted to marry, it's a person like you. And I remember feeling that way that summer. And I remember thinking like, no, this is worth it, even if this costs me other things or in other places. Yeah. And as God worked it out, seeking, after him and deciding to be in a relationship with you worked out in context of all the other things like Calvary. Yeah. I think that summer it was really understanding like, no, like when it comes to when God puts a woman like this in front of you, like you pause other things. You don't try to just pursue everything else. You go, no, this is really special and really worth the pursuit, which you made me pursue. Yeah. And that was something we've talked about for years. Like we really actually believe that men should pursue, but you really made me work for it.
I did. So also, by the way, during all of these dates, I'm not letting him kiss me at all.
I did try to kiss her and got
so many times
shut down hard.
Yeah.
But ultimately that summer she keeps saying, really, we can't be boyfriend and girlfriend, but you can keep pursuing me, which I took as permission to keep taking her on dates and talking to her and spending time with her and spending time with her family. She ultimately leaves for Switzerland, as we knew was going to happen for her study abroad year. And we went on a very nice date the night before.
Can I tell them what you did?
Sure.
It was so, guys, and again, I look back on myself now and be like, you're crazy. Why didn't you just accept it at that moment? But okay, when I tell you guys this last date before I left on an airplane, it's so sweet. He took me to Mastro's, okay? An intern took all of his money and spent it on Mastro's to take me to dinner, which was so sweet, so kind. And then afterwards, we were back at his place. That sounds so bad, huh? But you were like living with JD. That's not like a weird thing, right? To say that we were back at his place, right? Okay. Anyway, we were back at his place, and so he gives me this photo of us from our first date, and on the frame he had written, "All beautiful are you, my darling. There is no flaw in you," which is Song of Songs. It's a verse from Song of Songs. Do you remember which one?
I do.
Okay, cool. And that was really beautiful, and I was like, oh, this is so nice. And then he had given me this picture, and then he grabbed his guitar, and then he had written me a song, and he sang me a song, and it was really, really beautiful. It was really sweet. And no one's ever written me a song before. And I still didn't let him kiss me that night. And then I left on a plane and without us being official. And so I really made him work for it. But basically, once I landed in Switzerland, I like settled into my place. I know I'm skipping the part that I know, but I settled in, and then I Skyped him, which is like such an old phrase, and Skyped him and basically just said, all right, can we backdate our relationship? Let's be boyfriend and girlfriend, and we'll just count it from our first date.
Yeah, so we backdated our relationship. Yes. So we began
July
dating.
31st.
Yeah, so we become boyfriend and girlfriend, but
yes.
This is while you're in Switzerland for the year.
Right.
Now ultimately you do visit for Christmas, so you're back for a little bit. But I think that year, and we've talked about this, was the year when we learned to communicate with one another. It's one of those things where we couldn't just hang out, and it wasn't just sit on the couch together or anything else. There wasn't a physical boundary issue because there was a continent boundary, right?
Yes.
Like we were not on the same continent,
right.
But it really became us talking to one another, writing each other letters, even having expectations about how often we were going to communicate with different time zones.
Yeah.
And I think in that year, we really learned about each other and really learned to communicate with each other without all of the other stuff that sometimes goes along with having to be together physically. And so in a weird way, starting our relationship off with you being abroad was actually a blessing. And then, when you came back, it just felt like, I can't believe you get to be back. Like how fun that we actually get to be together.
Yeah.
And so you being in Switzerland was a really remarkable part of our relationship in as much as God grew us. Yeah. And I was able to really start working here at the church, pouring myself into church and seminary and all the different things I was doing. And so I think in God's kindness to us, we started off a relationship in a way that we would almost recommend no one else does.
Yeah, exactly. Because long distance is hard.
Long distance is so hard, but long distance is easier when you know there's an end date.
Yes.
And that end date is close enough that you can make that happen. So you came back in May or you came back in December.
Yeah, we had 4 weeks together. Yeah. Our first kiss was in LAX terminal.
It was, yeah, LAX. Her coming off the plane was our first kiss,
Yes.
which was pretty awesome.
It was cute.
And then we went to a wedding a couple days later, and that's where we first said, I love you to one another
right. Yep.
At Sherwood Country Club, where we eventually got married. And so that was kind of fun. And then you went off again. I would actually say that second semester of you being gone was way harder.
Yes.
We had gotten used to being together, and now we were apart. And we were just dealing with some of the early friction of two wildly different people who love Jesus and try to love each other, trying to do that. And so I think that second semester was a little harder. You came back in the spring of 2011.
Yeah.
And at that point, I had actually just been hired here at Calvary in my first kind of real job outside of the internship. And so that created its own problems and really problems that have existed for the last decade since, of full-time ministry and marriage, and trying to kind of fit those things well together, and trying to really take a job at the church serious, and at the same time trying to love you. And I think we've grown in that area, and we've done better in that area. But there are times where that's a real struggle for our family. Of church ministry is not a neat 9-to-5 thing that never bleeds into family life. And I think we've had to figure out where are the times where that's acceptable, and where are the times that I have to grow through that, and where are the times that you, as a wife and as a girlfriend and fiance and all the different things you were, have to receive that as God's calling on your life, and accept the fact that there are going to be times where I'm at camp, or times where I'm traveling on a mission trip. And when are the times that I, as a husband, need to say, no, someone else wants my attention, but my wife needs it right now, and that's my call. And that's a dynamic tension that I don't know that we'll ever solve, but it's one that we've worked through, and I think, Lord willing, gotten better at in the last decade. But that really began in the spring of 2011 as you came back. I remember when we started dating, backdated, 6 months of 2010. We dated for 6 months of 2010. I remember coming into 2011 and made the declaration that kind of scared you a little. 2011, that 12-month period, would be the year where I understood and decided, for me at least, whether or not we were moving toward marriage, or this wasn't going to work. Because for me, dating, just to date, or having a girlfriend just to have a girlfriend, wasn't an option. It was, this is heading toward marriage, or I shouldn't waste her time, or certainly mine. And so that's where I was. So I remember 2011, there were bumpy things and hard things and definite tensions. And some people tell the story of how they've never had a fight and everything's always been perfect. That is not us.
That is not us.
Man, and when we say we've had fights, it's not hurting each other. It's not yelling and screaming at each other, but it is tension, and it is working through differences and difficulties. And that has been a constant for us, where we just don't want to pretend everything's good. We don't even want to put out the public face that everything's perfect all the time. We have had to work through some things, and that's been a really beautiful thing. I think on the other side of working through some things is a stronger, healthier relationship than pretending there are no differences.
And I think, to me, that was one of the biggest attributes that I so admired about Brian, was his ability to have a he can disagree with me and not yell, not be angry. Past relationships, that was just the norm. And then it was like screaming matches. And for him, he was always calm, and even if he was like upset because I hurt him or something like that, like he never raises, you still don't. You don't raise your voice, which is something that is very attractive to me.
I don't raise my voice with you. With you, the YA crowd, I raise my voice sometimes.
Well,
but
when you're preaching, that's different. That's way different. But like when we're in a disagreement or something, you're also very okay if we are not completely wholly on the same page about something. Like, you're way better at nuances, and you're way better at that. And that took me a while, I think, to be like, wait, but we disagree. Are we okay? And he's like, yeah, we're totally okay. I understand your side, and hopefully you can see where my position is. And that was just so new to me. And so I think that was something that was really impactful, was that. And what made me want to be with you for the rest of my life was like, disagreements are inevitable, and marriage is only going to make disagreements more, and then having kids is just going to make it even more. And so it's like, if you can't find someone that you can fight well with, that's something that I would, if I was talking to young adults, that's something I would be intentionally like aware of and looking for. If you can't disagree over anything, and it always ends up in a screaming match, then maybe start to reevaluate or seek help or try to figure out what's the real hurt going on there. And that's just something I think that's been really helpful. And because we do disagree and we do have things, and God created both of us so different. And I think that's been for our marriage's like strength, like that we do complement each other well. There are times where it can frustrate me and where I get nervous because, again, you're way more comfortable with disagreeing on things than I am. And so I think that's just something that's been a real key component in our relationship from the beginning to even now. And so
I'm going to move my arm here because it's gone dead. But it's not because I'm mad at you. It might be. All right. So we were dating all throughout 2011, and then 2011 wraps up and we entered 2012, and I started to get to a place where I was pretty confident that I wanted to propose. She was going to graduate college a year from then, so in December of 2012.
Correct.
And I kind of knew, okay, I'd love to be engaged while she's a senior in college, and then if we were married afterwards. So I knew I wanted to get married, but I also knew that that marriage is a really serious and weighty thing. And so I remember two things I did that really prepped me for making this decision that I was going to propose to you. Well, I guess three things. The first thing I did was I went for a day alone out to a retreat in Malibu just to pray and fast and be with the Lord and journal and think. And that was a really wonderful day of just kind of thinking and processing and trying to cut out all the distractions and say, Lord God, it was almost one of those, Lord God, if there's a reason I shouldn't marry this woman, would you please tell me now, because I don't want to mess up. And listen, I can't claim to have heard the audible voice of God or anything that day. I just know I left that day with a peace and a centeredness that moving forward on this made sense. But then also the scriptures say there's wisdom in a multitude of counselors. And so I remember at the time I had a guys group that met once in a while at JD's place that I was living at the time. So I had probably 6 or 8 guys. I remember sitting out on a patio. We were sitting around a fire pit. And I remember I said, gentlemen, I need your attention. I said, I have every intention of proposing to Dani Gurman. And right now is the moment where if you think that's a foolish idea or you have something to say, you need to say it now or forever hold your peace. And I went around, not just generally, but each person and said, do you agree? Do you agree? And that's kind of my aggressive nature. But it was also this wonderful time where each of them kind of got to speak and everyone was on board with it and everyone really liked it. And it was this good moment of realizing, okay, I'm at peace with the Lord. I'm at peace with the wise men who are around me. And so that led me toward wanting to propose. I remember buying the ring down in Santa Monica. I remember doing dinner with your parents and taking them out to dinner and having a great conversation with them. And then I remember April 20th of 2012. So 2 years to the day after we met. The night before I had a dress dropped off at your apartment. We were going to go on a photo shoot for the day. JD Lasky was going to take photos throughout the day. And that was kind of the setup to our day of proposal. I don't know how you remember the day where I popped the question.
Well, I was already a little upset because the weekend before he did a fake out proposal. And for any young adult man, never, ever do a fake out proposal, please.
What happened was I took her on a very nice date the week before, and we happened to walk down the Malibu Pier at sunset to watch the sunset from Malibu Pier. She assumed I was going to propose. I did not. I didn't get down on one knee. I didn't, but she's understandably upset about it.
Yes. He took us to like one of our very first date spots for dinner and then went down the pier. And it was like, this would totally be a spot where someone could get proposed to. Anyway, it's beside the point. He was trying to throw me off. It's okay.
So that next week, April 20th, took you on the date for the day. It's JD, you and myself. We're going taking photos all over Los Angeles. We even took photos here at Calvary as the place where we got to know each other all throughout the city. And then we showed up at Wildwood Park, the playground, not the hiking park, the playground near your house where we had spent some time together. We had sat on the swings and just talked about life and stared up at the stars. And we'd go to that playground and what I had set up with your sister was a table with flowers and with a Bible on it that was open to Ephesians chapter 5, which is a passage about marriage we loved. And then on the table was the ring box. And so I don't know what your experience was in that moment.
No, I mean, it was, at that point, doing the photo shoot, I was like, okay, when is it happening? It's going to happen. because I wanted a photo of the moment happening. And so when we like walk up to the park and there was the table and the Bible and the ring and I just remember walking up there and him, he read through like Ephesians 5 and just talked about, Dani, like it talks about how like husbands love your wives as Christ loved the church and being willing to lay down your life for them. And I remember him just saying, Dani, like, that's what I want to do. I want to lay my life down for you. And it was just beautiful. And he got down on one knee and asked me to marry him. And I screamed yes. And,
you did.
And that was your one request.
Yeah. The one request going in was, I know Dani well, and sometimes when she's happy about something, she doesn't say it. Yes. She just cries and is overwhelmed. Yes, and I just said, you have to say the word yes. And she did. She said the word yes. And then we loaded up in the car, went down the road to her parents' house where your grandparents and my parents and everyone from out of town was there to celebrate. And that was a wonderful surprise. Yep. And that began our period of engagement. Yeah. Engagement was a really wonderful process in that you were finishing up school and were prepping for a wedding, and a really difficult process in that you were finishing up school and prepping for a wedding and just dealing with the stuff inside of us. That was our first experience during engagement with marriage counseling. Yeah. We did pre-marriage counseling, and that was a wonderful experience. Yes. Sat with someone and just kind of worked through some of our childhood stuff, some of our icks, some of our sins, some of our just proclivities and differences. And that was a really wonderful, wonderful experience. Leading up until that wedding. And so it was March 1st of 2013. You had just graduated college. What happened in between getting engaged and you graduating college and us getting married was me becoming the high school pastor here at Calvary, which is a really big process for us of, we were engaged, about to get married. And then God really brought me into what at the time was really my dream role here at Calvary to get to be the high school pastor. Totally. And I think that was a big step of faith for us because when I proposed to you, I was in a little bit of a lesser role here, lesser in terms of career and movement forward, but also in terms of pay. And we didn't know how we were going to afford this. And so that just really was God providing for us in the midst of that engagement season. And I got married March 1st, 2013. We did an open ceremony here at the church. So we said anyone is able to come. Obviously our guests came, but high school students and middle school students at the time who I'd been working with and you had been working with. So we had many, many people here in the worship center. It was a blast. It was awesome. And then we went over to Sherwood Country Club for our reception and all the normal stuff of the cake and the first dance and all those types of things. And of course, Diet Coke on the wedding table for us. And then, man, we flew off to Hawaii, did our honeymoon, which was...
Well, we should tell them, like, we didn't have sex before we got married.
We did not, And so
I feel like that's an important thing
no.
to talk about.
It is an important thing. This is good. I can speak to this. Okay, so our wedding night,
Yeah, well, no, I mean, I should be clear that I had broken boundaries before, like in past relationships, but I hadn't had sex.
Yeah.
And neither one of us had had sex.
Neither one of us had, and so our wedding night was this really special thing where I think our wedding night was special in as much as we had waited and it was worth it. And, and I think I'm always careful to say for someone who hasn't waited or has that past, it doesn't mean you can't find that redemption. Totally. But I just want to advocate for what we experienced was really special and was really wonderful. There was nothing to compare it to. It was just us. Yeah. It was an intimate and beautiful moment, and we really treasure that moment. Yeah. That's not to say, and I think both of you guys would say, early in the relationship as we were dating and engaged, it's not to say we didn't push up against those boundaries and struggle with that and try to backpedal and say, okay, how far is too far? All of those things happened for us, but I think we do celebrate the gift it was to offer that virginity to each other on our wedding night. Yeah. And again, not the only way of finding satisfaction in marriage, but certainly was a way we did and a gift that we celebrate and look back on and celebrate. So that was remarkable to get to experience that. Yeah. The fruit of the payoff of saying for so many years of our life, even before we knew each other, we're waiting, and then to get to experience that, and then to know that the joy that sex is in a marriage. It's a gift. It's God's idea. It's a beautiful thing. And we're just so grateful for that.
Totally. Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, I couldn't agree more. I feel like sex is the best. And like it is the best. And like for so long growing up, I was like, sex is bad, sex is bad, sex is bad. And like in ways like that was me trying to like protect myself from like falling into sin or whatever, because growing up in the church, that was how I was feeling. And then when you're in that in-between phase, and you, at least for me, I was so naive, even in dating, that I didn't realize that there were all these other things between kissing and sex. And so the not knowing made me, I fell into a lot of those boundaries and crossing them. And even we did, and we struggled with that in the in-between. But then to say like, when we did get to have sex together, like God made it like for our joy. Like he made it for marriage and like the gift that was, and that it continues to be, because it's just like, it's been just us, is really special. And so, yeah.
And believe me, you're a Christian man or woman, you get married, and sex is a really beautiful gift. And yet one of the most comical things you realize when you become a married man or woman is how little time is actually sex in the relationship, and how much really marriage is friendship, right? And I think when you're a 14-year-old boy, you think I'll get married and that's all I'll do ever, right? But that's not the case. Like most of marriage is friendship, and it's eating popcorn on the couch, watching a television show, or playing cornhole in the backyard, or laughing about something our kids did. And I think one of the things that we've learned in being married is there's the height and the passion and the romance, and all of that can be a good part of it, but that really can't sustain over time. What sustains over time is just this friendship, this affection that we want to hang out together, and we actually enjoy being around each other. And we, even if there are times we don't enjoy some of the same movies or shows or different little things like this, there's an enjoyment of the life we've built together. And that is a really fun thing. It's remarkable how much of marriage is just sitting on the couch talking to one another, and how much of a gift that actually becomes. And how when God said in Genesis 2, it's good for man not to be alone, like he's really thinking of that kind of thing, like that we would have someone to do this life with, and to experience the ups and downs. And in our 8 years of marriage since March 1st, 2013, there's been plenty of ups and downs. There have been really great moments of life and ministry and friendships and trips we've taken and things we've done. And then there have been really painful moments and really discouraging moments, even in between us. We mentioned going to pre-marriage counseling. We have not been so awesome that we haven't needed to go to some tune-up counseling in marriage. And that's been a real gift for us to get to kind of be years into marriage and still go, let's go see a counselor just to kind of work through this and try to love one another better. And that's been a real gift to us, and not a shame for us. Just to say, if we were sick, we'd go to a doctor. And when we're not doing so well, we'd go to a therapist and work through some things. So that was a real gift. And then
the other gift I think too with marriage has been seeking out like a small group and seeking out mentors, and seeking out like married couples who are older even than you, and seeking out their wisdom. We are fortunate enough to be in a small group with and we were able to start it like literally from the beginning of our marriage. And it's just been a really beautiful thing. I feel every week we glean so much wisdom.
And we're in a small group with a couple that's about 25 years older than us, a couple that's maybe 10 years older than us, and another couple that's about our age.
Exactly.
And so there's a breadth of that, where the oldest couple, their kids are grown and gone. Right. And the youngest couples like us have young kids still in the house. And so I think we learn from one another. We do marriage in community. We do marriage, not just as a family unit as our own. We are our own family unit. And yet your parents live just down the road. We spend tons of times with them, and my brother lives locally, and we get to hang out with him. And I think there's just a lot of places where when you're growing up, at least for me, you thought marriage was me getting away from everything else, and what you realize is you're still connected to all these other wonderful things. Absolutely. And marriage just becomes a gift within that.
Yeah, definitely.
So we had some of those high moments, and then we start to gear up toward having kids. This is about 5 years in. we had been married in 2013. I was doing seminary at the time. I graduated seminary in 2015. And then we made a decision that from my graduation from seminary toward beginning to start to have kids or want to have kids, we're going to wait 1 year and just enjoy a year of being married and me not working so hard in seminary. And that was a wonderful year. So 2015 to 2016, the fall of 2016, we decided it's time. Let's have a baby. And that was an exciting, fun thing for us. We actually took a big trip to Europe, just saying like, we're never going to get to do this again until our kids are grown. So let's go to Paris. And we did some wonderful things. And we said, we want to have a baby. And I know that was kind of a big journey for you.
Yeah. I mean, it had always been my dream to be a mom. And it had always been, that was always my dream job. When growing up, it was like, if I can't be a Disney princess, then can I be a mom? And so that was my dream job, was to be able to do that. And I was working at the time next door at Oaks, and that was awesome, and I loved that. But I was really just feeling like I wanted to start a family, and I'm also not the most patient person on the planet. So when we started trying and it didn't happen right away, I think I was really discouraged. And for anyone who's ever tried to conceive and tried for a kid, sometimes the emotional toll every month can be really difficult. It feels like a roller coaster of the disappointment of finding out that you're not pregnant, and then it's like you're going up, this like hope of that it will be, and then you crash again when you get the next negative on a pregnancy test. And so, and again, looking back on it, in the grand scheme of things, it took us 6 months to become pregnant. But again, for an impatient human who struggles with that was a really long time for me. And anyway, we found out in a funny way, January 2017, we were up at Hume Lake, and I fell and hurt my back pretty darn good, and had to have my parents drive up and pick me up because I was laid out. And they were going to do x-rays and stuff on my back, but they asked, could you be pregnant? And I said, I won't know for another week. And they were like, okay, well, we'll just hold off on it for now. And then a week later, sure enough, I got the first positive pregnancy test, and Brian was at work when I found out. And so I called him crying and said, I just really need you home right now. My back, it hurts. And so he was panicked, and he was like, okay, I'm coming. And so he like barged in through the door, and I had a little sign that said, you're a dad, with the like pregnancy test on it. And that was a sweet moment. That was fun.
So we found out we're pregnant, found out just a few months later we're having a girl.
Yep.
Which was, for me, I grew up in a house of all boys, her in a house of all girls.
Yes.
And so I think for me, it was an initial, if I'm being honest, like, oh no, I wanted a son first,
Yeah.
And now I just look back and go, I have the best first child. I have my daughter. And anyway, so
No, you can keep going. It's good.
No.
She got you wrapped around her finger.
No, that's true. Yeah. So she's born in October of 2017. And man, I don't cry a lot. I really don't.
He didn't cry at our wedding. He does not cry. And as soon as Grace was born, it was like, I mean, I've never seen him cry that much. It was the sweetest thing I've ever seen in my entire life.
I think what happened in that moment was like she came into this world, and I just realized like this little girl has a whole life ahead of her, and like we're responsible for that. And but it wasn't a crying of like woe is us. It was a crying of like how beautiful is it that we get to watch this life unfold.
Yeah.
I mean, all the way up into including her prom and her wedding day and her kids someday, and just to think of this whole life ahead of her. And we have a mentor who says getting married doesn't really change your life. Having kids changes your life.
Yes.
And that's absolutely the case. Yes. Getting married was an enormous blessing in our life. So and kids are an enormous blessing, but they change the dynamic of how you think about your day and your life. And things are never the same after kids come into the picture. Yeah. And we wouldn't go back. We wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. Having our daughter, and then about a year ago, our son, we loved it and have loved every moment of it. But yeah, it's been difficult at times, physically difficult, emotionally difficult. Sometimes we're trying to work through something, but the kids need our attention. There's just a never-ending litany of things that are difficult. But I think one of the things we've learned is difficult is the pathway toward the best stuff in life,
Totally.
And so these kids can be really tricky at times to figure out how to best love them and love each other and navigate all of this. And yet, man, it is just the best blessing that I didn't know was possible to love someone that much.
Oh, totally.
Well, one of the things we might talk about is in between Grace, our daughter, and Noah being born. Grace in 2017, Noah in 2020. We went through some losses. Do you want to kind of describe that?
So it was always the plan for us that we wanted Grace, our daughter, to have a sibling. And so, pretty much after she turned 1, we were like, okay, let's do this. Like, let's get going and let's try. And it happened. And on almost on her first birthday, we were pregnant. And so it was just like so much joy, so much excitement. We told our whole family on Grace's birthday, like, we're pregnant. And then it was, a week later that I had a miscarriage. And so it was still very early. But the thing about miscarriages is just like, no matter how early it is, once you find out you're pregnant, you just start envisioning an entire life and an entire future. And, thinking about, they'll be going to preschool in this year and they're this far apart. And, you just start envisioning, and this is when we'll move Grace to her big girl bed. And, you just start making all these plans almost immediately. And then after the miscarriage, then it's just that future's gone. And so that was really hard. But we wanted to try again. And then 4 months later, we got pregnant again on our anniversary. And again, it was just like, oh, this is so exciting. This will be our rainbow baby. And then a week later, same thing as before, I had a miscarriage. And so,
and the rainbow baby is the baby you have after a miscarriage.
Yeah. Right. And so, the first one was tough. And then the second one was, debilitating to me. Felt like so devastating. And it was hard on us. It was hard on our marriage. It was hard because I know he was just trying to help, and I was feeling just so helpless and hopeless, and just like, we're never going to get pregnant and Grace will be an only child. And just, there's so many fears that start going through your mind. And I just remember so vividly, this was in March of 2019, that this was after the fires, and I was driving to my mom's house in Wildwood, and it was right when the super bloom was happening. And I just remember driving, and it was, I don't hear God's voice very often, but in that moment it was like, look at this. Like, you've been through the fire, you've been through destruction, you've been through such loss and pain, and yet look at how beautiful this is. Like, look at the flowers are blooming. It's even more beautiful than before. Like, I still have a beautiful story to write for you. And I think that was a really key moment for me in my faith, and just learning to trust that God's story and his plan is far better than my own. And so, and so then a few months later, found out we were pregnant again. Yeah. And once we got past the week after that, and when I'd experienced those losses, then it started to become real. And then we found out we were having a boy, and then
and that freaked you out.
And that freaked me out, because I was like, a boy? I always assumed I was just going to have 2 girls, because that was my experience. So, but then Noah was born right before the pandemic hit. And so Brian got to be there. My mom got to be there for his birth. And that was just, it changed. I mean, this whole last year with Noah has been just incredible. And he is just this little, he's like a little imp. I know that's bad. Is that bad? I don't know. He looks at you with this face of pure joy and mischievousness all at the same time. Yeah. Like he has a secret that he's not telling you, and his side eye. Yeah, I think it's just been beautiful. Watching Brian become a dad has been incredible. Brian's an amazing dad, and that's, I think, another thing that's just been strengthened our marriage is just watching each other become parents. And you're right, there's like we've had to figure out different ways to make time for each other and prioritize each other and make sure that I'm not just focused on the kids and I actually give you a hug and say good morning. I know I'm working on that, but
It's interesting with miscarriages. I think women and men really experience that very differently, where for you, it felt really personal, really wrapped up in yourself. I think there's even an element of like, what's wrong inside of me that caused this to happen? Yeah. And I think as a man, it felt like, okay, that's a bummer, but we got pregnant before, we can do it again. So for me, it was more factual, logical. I know we can get pregnant, right? But I think for you, it was more like, no, like something's happened inside of me that you can, like, I can forget about it really easily. I can move on, but I think it was a little more personal and a little more painful for you. And I think that was a difficult season for me. And you, like you referenced, in as much as I think for you, it was this real deep, painful journey. And for me, it was sort of like, I felt like I was in the journey, but not experiencing the kind of pain you were and not sure how to help, or if I even could help, or if I would just kind of be watching you go through that pain and feeling helpless. And so I think there were moments of not really being sure how to handle that kind of loss. We had experienced suffering and pain and bad things before as a couple, but I think never in this kind of way where it felt so deeply personal to you and so theoretical to me. Even pregnancy, I mean, the babies we did get to deliver, Noah and Grace. Yeah. Having a baby for a woman from the very beginning, you feel it. It's inside of you. It's connected to you. For me, it's a theory that you're pregnant. And even when I can feel the baby kick, it's sort of like, I don't know what that was. Like it feels so disconnected from me until I get to hold it. They say women get a 9-month head start on parenting because you're connected. And so I think the same is true in the miscarriage space where you experience that, not just, I heard about the news, but you experienced it. And I think that was a difference that I don't know that we struggled in as much as we were at odds, but I certainly struggled on how do I care for my wife who's hurting so deeply right now. Yeah. One of the most tried and true things they say about marriage is that what men err on is trying to fix things too much, right? And when you're hurting, I want to fix it. I want to take away problems. And there's some times where I can take away problems. There's some times where I can help. There's some times where I can do something or fix something in a way that makes things better. But I think there's some aches that really can't be fixed, either by me doing something or as a pastor who speaks all the time, right? Like a nice little speech isn't going to help you. And so I think having to deal with a little bit of helplessness is actually this really, in a strange way, this kind of experience of a kind of suffering and helplessness that makes me rely on God to say, like, God, I cannot help, and I can't help my wife right now. I cannot bring her through this. Only you can. And so I think the experience of helplessness is not something I typically feel. Like, I don't typically feel like I can't do anything about this problem. But I did in that little season. Yeah, and I think when you were just there for me and you were just holding me and hugging me and just like comforting me, like that was the best thing that I needed. One of the things that marriage will do to you, and one of the things marriage has done for us, is to humble us, in as much as you recognize that all of the problems or dysfunctions that are present in a relationship are because of the people in the relationship. And we would like to blame someone else and we'd like to blame other things, but you realize some of the same patterns we get back to are because you and I have not dealt with them in a proper way. And I think so often deal with it just means learning how selfish and arrogant I actually am and learning how into myself I actually am. I remember our marriage counselor, when we were just getting started, pre-marriage counseling, we had some disagreements and some issues to work through. And I remember we asked a question: if we're in a fight and it seems like, well, you did some things wrong and I did some things wrong, but we're mad because the other person's not recognizing that, we asked, how do we get out of the fight? Like, who should say, who should say I'm sorry first or who should deal with it first? And she just looks at us very calmly. And I remember, I'll never forget it. She said, the person who should say I'm sorry first is the person who's more mature in the relationship. And I remember being like, oh, because I don't want to say I'm sorry first. I don't want to apologize. And yet I think maturity does come through being the person who says, I'm sorry, I stepped on your toes. I did something wrong. How can I make things better? And I think that has been a humbling thing to recognize. In the moments where I just feel frustrated, it's usually moments that reveal my pride and arrogance rather than my correctness.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, that's so good. Yeah, I think the times where I feel the most humble is truly in those moments when, like, I know that I've been acting poorly and then he continues to love me anyway. Like, I remember there was one day when we were married, I don't know, a couple years, and I just remember I was like, I gave him attitude and I was disrespectful and just so I was bad. I felt like a terrible wife all day and I didn't make it right and I wasn't apologizing. And I remember I came home and he had decorated the entire house for Christmas. And it was like really early, really early, because I love decorating for Christmas early and he doesn't. And he was like a very post-Thanksgiving Christmas decoration person. And it was like November 1st and he had decorated the whole house. And I remember walking in and talk about feeling humbled is like when someone loves you when you don't deserve it, that's the cross, right? That's Jesus. And I think that's what marriage is supposed to be, is loving each other. Neither one of us deserve it. And like marriage at its best is when we love each other when the other doesn't deserve it. And you do that very well and you love sacrificially in that way. And I know that that's when I think are at our best.
The marriage covenant we made back in 2013 is really a decision for richer, for poorer, for better, for worse. Yeah. We actually have our marriage vows up on our wall. It's the first thing when you wake up. It's the first thing you see on the opposite wall. And I think for us to see those and remember those are really central. And then to really try to shape our lives around how do we, one, not violate that covenant, but two, also make sure we're protecting the other from even the appearance that we're violating that covenant or straying away from it. And so there are little things I do, and I don't think these are things everyone has to do, but practices in my own life, especially when it comes to being around other women or, not being in a home or in a car or something like that alone with another woman who's not you, who's not family. I want to make sure we're setting those boundaries up really clearly. I think you've even had moments where you're home with the kids and there's someone who wants to stop by and we're just trying to communicate well on how do we make sure there's not a violation of that covenant? How do we make sure we've not strayed, but even more immediately, how do we make sure it doesn't even look like that? Yeah. And so I think that's a decision that we just made a long time ago to say, hey, this is how we're going to set this up. I think especially in a pastoral role, we just watched too many good pastors fall because their boundaries were set up in such a way that led them in. And I just don't want to be arrogant enough to think that I don't need to set up any boundaries in my life. And so those boundaries come to where we are physically, kind of how we communicate with people, like all these different things, to make sure that we're not wandering into a space that could really wreck our marriage. And at this point in life, not only hurt us, but our children as well.
So I think something that we started doing, like even when we first got married, even before we had kids, is like doing like a consistent date night and like getting out and like having intentional time for each other. And then obviously when we had kids, we had to be super intentional about that. And, getting babysitters or asking my parents or to watch the monitors or watch the kids so that way we could spend time together. And then the pandemic hit and then that's like a whole other thing. Yeah. But still trying to be intentional about that time. And we started doing this thing recently where on Fridays and Saturdays when we're home together that we just like delete social media and that's not even as it's not going to be a distraction for those days when we're all together as a family and together, just the two of us. And we try to be intentional about, going away together and having trips. And we are fortunate enough that like my parents are close by and they're willing to watch the kids for us. And and that way we do get time together, even if we just drive up to Pismo and, conversations in the car where it's uninterrupted by, kids in the back or whatever, like that has been really helpful, I think, for us. And so, yeah, I think those things have been really helpful in like making sure that our marriage is strong and healthy. And also when we've needed it, like going to counseling and getting a tune-up and being like, and investing in our marriage in that way.
Yeah, investing in our marriage every Wednesday night at small group.
Yes, exactly.
Trying to be present when we're there. I think sometimes we fall into the trap of we don't have enough time together.
Right.
When the actual issue is we're together, but we're kind of on our phones or we're kind of doing other things. And so I think it's not just creating time for each other, but when we are together, deciding we're together now. Yeah. And then also understanding when I'm off preaching at a camp or when I'm doing something or you're taking care of the kids in some way, that's not our time together. And just trying to be really clear about those moments, I think helps create a rhythm where the issue isn't we need to hang out all day every day. That's really not what we need in order for our marriage to function. Is that we need these really thoughtful times and seasons and birthdays and Christmas and Easter and Thanksgiving to be able to really set those out as benchmarks to say we're going to spend time together. And so I think that's helped. About 2 years ago, you started insisting that I take at least one vacation day a month. And so I've been hit and miss on that, but I've been trying to take those days off and be home with the family. Yes. And I think when we can do that and we can have fun things, that really helps create not only the memories for the kids, but also for us. Yeah. I think a lot of the joy of our marriage covenant right now is found in shared joy over the kids, what our kids said or how they acted or how they play together. Totally. They go to bed and then we just sit around talking about how much joy we have. And I think that's been a real blessing rather than seeing these kids as this burden that has made our life so much worse. It's the opposite.
Yeah, they're a joy. In ways that they brought us closer together because they are so stinking cute. Yeah. And we think they're cute. And because we enjoy them so much, like it's just another thing that bonds us. Yep. And so, I love that. For me, just looking back and reflecting on, us dating and marriage and all of it is just like, I look back and I just wish, I could tell myself as a young person, as a young adult who was so excited at the prospect of getting married and wanted a family and wanted all of this. And it was a deep desire in my heart for so long. And I had a very unique vision of what I thought it was going to be like. And that's kind of been a recurring theme in my life where I have an expectation of what it's going to look like. And then God just comes in and says, no, I have this for you. And it's better. And it's better than anything you could imagine. But that all starts with a relationship with Jesus and investing in that first. And I think once you invest in that relationship, like it was undeniable that he was the guy for me. And so, it was just like thing after thing after thing was like, okay, God, this can't not be you. Like this can't not be you telling me that this is the one for me. And so, so that would be my hope and prayer for anyone who so desperately wants marriage or who so desperately wants to be in a relationship and family and wants that for their future is to just invest wholeheartedly into Jesus first. And when you do that, you realize that that's what can fill you and that's what fills your life is a relationship with him. And anything else that comes along in your life, like he will make it abundantly clear that this is who he wants you to walk through life with. And so
I think for me, I would, after 8 years of being married and getting married in what previous generations would have considered kind of old. I was 24 and she was 22, but in our modern times is kind of young. Yeah. I would just say has been just the greatest gift. Yes. And I think if there's one thing I'd say is marriage is incredible. It's amazing. And I think we live in a culture that statistically we know is getting married less and less and later and later. And I just think for some people, that's the right route. And for some people, that's okay. And there's no shame in not being married. And there's no shame in getting married later. There's none of this that's prescriptive that you have to do this. I just want to speak as two people who got married before 25 and say, that was the greatest thing. And I don't look back on that and wish I had spent more time as a single guy or traveling the world or anything else. The greatest adventure of my life is marrying this woman and having babies with her. It is the greatest thing. I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. I wouldn't trade it for more money or more traveling or more experiences. This is a wonderful, wonderful life. And it doesn't mean it's an easy life, but it's worth it. And every single bit of it has just such fruit and such depth in our life. And so for me, I guess I'd just tell you, marriage is a gift. Marriage is amazing. And to get married is not to lose out on a bunch of things, but it's to discover this whole world that you didn't know even existed and was available. And so, man, it just so encouraged that we did get married. You are such a blessing in my life and such a blessing in the lives of so many. And I think, whatever we've experienced so far, we have some wonderful years ahead of us to raise our babies, to love each other, and to ultimately follow after Jesus together. So love you.
Love you too. Let's go get a Diet Coke.